We're not going to say Donald Trump. We're not going to talk about Nazis. We're not going to talk about World War III. We're going to talk about what's going on in AI. Nathan Lambert of the Interconnects newsletter, an AI researcher at the Allen Institute, is going to talk open versus closed models in a what's going on in Meta, the pace of AI progress, and model sycophancy and the future of humanity. Nathan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. Reasoning didn't even make it on your list. Reasoning models are over. They're just too normal now. They're too normal. They're not over.
I actually want to hit this point home to start off. O3, like, I wasn't bought in at first, and now I really feel it. Like, I think it's a seminal moment in human history. Like, all of the other ones, you know, I would find use cases for it now and then, but in the, like, is this a bicycle for a mind thing? Going from the 7-minute deep research answers to the 45-second O3 answers that tie in search and can go across multiple languages and can reason like well enough for me to be impressed by, like the speed at which it can get me like thoughtful, considered information is like fast enough to like be still with me on my train of thought in thinking about a question or an issue. And I think that has been the thing that has made it from like a 25% thing to like a 75% thing for me. So I don't know. I just met someone who recently left the U.S. intelligence community. He'd been gone for 6 months. And I'm just like, so how's AI been? Like, you finally get to do the thing now. And he's like, you know, not really for me. And I was sort of like almost shocked and offended. It's like, I don't know. It's like you moved to France and you never tried cheese before. Like this is just, we're in this incredible time and we might not be in it for that long where the sort of the human plus AI is like more powerful than either the human or the AI when it comes to just like thinking and analyzing things. Of the type of questions that like, you know, aren't necessarily, you know, hard STEM ones, but are more kind of open-ended social science researchy questions. And like, that's a really remarkable and exciting time to be alive. So everyone, if you guys haven't spent your $20 on OpenAI and just asked O3 whatever pops into your head, you really should, because it's the future and it's here. And I don't know, it's like nothing else I've ever experienced before.
Yeah, how I summarize this, and I've been saying this, is that like the DeepSeek R1 and like the O3 ArcAGI solving in December, all of these things kind of feel like the shock and awe of it, but in reality, O3 is the model that will really shift how like normal people can perceive using AI. I think the previous ones have been good for math and code, which is good for AI researchers. But AI researchers are kind of like in their own cave and patting their own back and being like, oh, this is such an amazing breakthrough for like 0.01% of the population and no one cares about it. And then in some ways, like O3 wasn't even received as well. I think I'm eagerly awaiting O3 Pro, which kind of, if you've used O1 Pro, its consistency is remarkable. So if you could kind of have this magic of O3 where it could just pull a rabbit out of the hat a lot of times, but really get it 100% of the time, I think O3 Pro for that reason could be like a really incredible model. And it just feels, it's nice to have things that feel different. I think Gemini 2.5 Pro is like, what's the best of, what would be the best possible form of something like a very good GPT-4, all these models that we're marching down. Like, it's just brute force is incredible, but kind of this weirdness and new type of usefulness by really accessing the web is what sets O3 apart. And I use it all the time for search, and the ChatGPT app is a little broken in terms of the UX that they show you. It's just like all you have to do is select O3 and try weird things, and you don't have to click any of the extra buttons they have.
So why is O3 in search so special, or what's under the hood there, Nathan?
So effectively, some basic facts are that they scaled up the training time compute for the reinforcement learning stage by another 10x. If you listen to people at OpenAI on these kind of RL teams, they really expect this new post-training compute with scaled reinforcement learning to at least be comparable in compute cost to pre-training. So what's happening in the labs is that the pre-training progress is still really happening. A lot of data architecture innovations to make serving really effective. So that's still going on, even though the rate of data acquisition, which was really fueling a lot of previous scaling, has slowed down. So it's a lot of efficiency gains right now, and that'll probably last for about 1 to 2 years. But compute scaling is hard because you have to build out the whole next era of clusters. They're trying to do that, but that's going to slow down. And over 1 to 2 years, the amount of pre-training runs that need to be done on this like internet scale data is going to decrease. But also at the same time, these labs are really scaling up the amount of compute used in RL. And O3 specifically is a new type of RL where instead of just kind of going on what would be described as math and code problems where you could check them with math answers being labeled or code having unit tests, the model is being trained on similar and more data where it also can use tools like search during the process where it'll try a whole bunch of things before actually giving its final answer. You could do an O3 query on something like who is Nathan Lambert, and it'll search like 10 or 15 websites. And each of those is some sort of action that the model is going to an external source. And I still believe that that's all happening in one forward pass of the model. So like O3 and ChatGPT is not something like Deep Research or O1 Pro where there's some sort of search and back and forth on information or within the generation process. And these tools are just part of the forward generation of the model. And it's the only model like that. I think there's a lot of research on enabling tool use with RL, but to get it to be servable at that scale was a major breakthrough for OpenAI. And I think a big boon to the people that are saying like, will these reasoning models generalize? Like if searching over information effectively works as well as like math and code reasoning, I don't think you could ask for any more type of generalization. I think the dream generalization is like reasoning generalizes to some sort of like maybe like conscious like thinking, but that is you can't force the models to be human like. They're going to be powerful in their own way.
So after we've given OpenAI their kudos, they've also let us peer into a very dark future for humanity. Let's start with the facts, Nathan. What happened over a 3-day period when it came to 4.0 and sycophancy?
Yeah, so I think it was April 25th. OpenAI updated their main ChatGPT model. But their main model used by most people, call it 4.0, was updated to, quote, like improve personality and something, maybe memory. And that's what Sam Altman tweeted. And they did it. They ripped off the Band-Aid. And then over the next probably 48 hours, all these wild examples of ChatGPT reinforcing quite blatantly awful prompts by users, or not necessarily awful, but intentionally things that should not be praised as you control with this model. And it was just giving them positive feedback. It's going to be like, wow, I'm really figured out that bulimia was right for me. And ChatGPT would be like, wow, you go, girl. There's more extreme examples that we don't need to go down if you just accept that there was not really any barriers to its positive feedback to the user. The consequences are, in the short term, are kind of shocking, but if they actually leave that in the long term, would be a lot worse in ways that we don't know how to measure.
So Nathan, this clearly wasn't like the intention, at least on that day. How did a model telling you you're the greatest thing since sliced bread become part of OpenAI's flagship product? What signals were they getting from their data and their user testing that led them to create a model that did this to its users?
Yeah, so I think everybody listening to this, if you're invested in understanding this, should read OpenAI's postmortem on this, which gave us some hints. What they do there is they, as the AI company with the most eyes on them, lay out their release process and what types of evaluations they balance, along with some kind of subtle details on what might have been changes to their training stack. So it's very much worth reading. And at the end of the day, the core thing on the training side seemed to be that they had trained some sort of new reward model for their post-training, where they're doing something like reinforcement learning to optimize this reward model and other reward signals, was derived from predicting the thumbs up and thumbs down labels that came from the users. There's a couple sentences in there, I highlighted them in the blog post I wrote, that's essentially saying like this reward signal overpowered the other ones and contributed to this change in behavior. I think there's a couple takeaways here. One on the technical side is that reinforcement learning is just trying to make the numbers it can possibly go up. And if there's one number that's easier to go up, it's going to just crank that to a million. So I think the reward model signal there was really easy for a model of GPT-4's power to shift and nudge upwards. And at the same time, OpenAI did not have the complete evaluation suite to measure all the potential side effects of this training reward going up. So they had this like training reward signal, but they didn't have a proportional downstream suite, which could be sycophancy or other types of really static evals to measure it. At the same time, in this eval suite, they have mostly these kind of standard things, which would be like MLU or GPQA, which are public versions. They'll have private versions that look like this, which are capability evaluations. And they also have what people would colloquially call vibe tests or qualitative evaluations. And for this case of this model, all the numbers looked very good. Their training targets looked really good, but there were a couple stars on the kind of qualitative vibes test saying, oh, something feels a little off. And OpenAI made the decision to kind of trust the numbers rather than the qualitative judgment. And I think in doing so, they broke some kind of classic rules of tech, which is like don't train directly on your user data, because if you just do that, you're kind of capitalizing on a certain type of user, and like most users actually don't. Like when do I click thumbs up and thumbs down on ChatGPT? Like only if something is particularly broken. So I think there's just a lot of, I would say that's the high level summary of the major pieces of it, but the details of the postmortem are still interesting. It's like it is a form of over optimization, and then eventually we should try to get into the debate on if we think this was somewhat intentional by OpenAI, because I go both sides because I have insight into the people that lead model behavior, but also Sam Altman is Sam Altman.
Yeah. So you write this line, OpenAI has obvious cultural oddities, but their ideology is quite culturally aligned with providing user value in terms of output rather than engagement farming, even if this is imposing a ceiling on their business relative to the potential of ads, which, you know, I am sure is true. And I am sure Nathan's friends are all, you know, on the light side. But you know, we have Sam Altman hiring the, a president of operations, this former CEO of Instacart, who also like built up Facebook's whole kind of like A/B testing, engagement farming, algorithmic feed ecosystem, right? So two things that struck me about this. So I was reading Ben Smith's book Traffic a few weeks ago, which kind of tells the story of media back, you know, over the course of the 2000s and 2010s, when sort of Facebook gave and then Facebook took away, because there were points where they sort of like wanted these BuzzFeed listicle type stuff, and then there were points when they kind of like pulled it back. And it's just like the sort of like the engagement farming was by the writers themselves, not like the models, the writers themselves and the sort of media outlets, not necessarily like the I think that point is a little too convoluted. So it's interesting thinking about like, to what extent is this the future of how companies are going to incentivize their models and how humans are going to be engaging with them? Because if, you know, say OpenAI doesn't want to do this, like someone will. And this is really powerful stuff. I mean, we saw what kind of like engagement farming and like algorithmically driven, personalized, tailored content can do on YouTube and can do on Facebook and can do on TikTok. And, you know, this is like, I mean, I don't want to say I don't want to go so far as saying it's cancer, but like, this is like extremely powerful stuff. And in the past, it's all been done by user generated content, right? Of like the algorithm just kind of like trying to figure out and ranking what it is there. But like for whatever this thing is, can also sort of like be your friend and be like entirely personalized to you and be making, you know, videos and audio and content just like directly engaged to get right into your bloodstream. I mean, you talked about this earlier, that like at some level, right? Like OpenAI and these model makers broadly, when they're targeting consumers, are competing with Netflix and YouTube and TikTok for time. So I don't know. It just kind of seems inevitable that, like, even if OpenAI pulled it back now, like we're gonna have a lot of this in an even more like weapons grade refined form being shoved in front of us in the years to come.
Yeah, so I have a couple points to this. I think there's one side is to what extent is the deliverable of what the model is dictated from the top and specific metrics that leadership can follow. And the other side is that obviously somebody is going to try this, and what are the consequences of it and what does it mean? I think I'll start to the first one, and it's interesting in OpenAI's case because I think most people would agree that Sam Altman is kind of hyper-growth pilled. But when you actually train these models, so much of it could just be like looking at the data and you see these phrases show up and you can just delete it from the model. But Sam Altman's not doing that. Like, he's not going into the training data and editing things. But that's the sort of thing like what Joanne Jing, who leads character training or model behavior at OpenAI, like that's the thing that she would have started doing years ago on GPT-4. It's like, I don't like what the model says as a language model, blah, blah, blah. Like, she could just delete the as a language model phrase and just have the answer. So that's the type of thing that people can be doing. It's different training methodologies. So when you start using more RL, it's a bit harder to do that level of nuance control. So I think in some ways it makes sense that the sycophancy thing is downstream of RL. But I think because these recommendation systems are kind of uninterpretable in a way, I think it just kind of gets flown to the top, where you're going to present a trade-off to Zuckerberg, which is ad dollars versus retention. And it makes sense that it's going to just eventually, when there's competition, he's going to just be like, yeah, just ship the one that makes us more money. But if the models actually are a bit more artful, I don't know the exact power that these researchers have to exert on the model. At a place like AI2, I have pretty much complete control. I would also say that you're dealing with the fact that I think a lot of the employees at these labs are going to be in a bit over their heads, where they don't realize the extent that the leadership, who are really good at being leaders and controlling political capital, can kind of play them by setting strong narratives. So I think a lot of the researchers who are particularly AGI pilled have less nuance in their beliefs of it and ability to manipulate it than somebody like Sam Altman at the top, where the AGI pilled researchers really, really believe this and they're on a single track, which lets them make so much technical progress. Whereas somebody like Sam Altman is going to be ready for the kind of slide and using, and when presented with kind of technical signals that change the model in a way that's more business salient, that a lot of the researchers are going to kind of be operating at different levels. And I don't know how that transitions through an org chart at somewhere like OpenAI, but I would guess that that's kind of a trade-off that is happening, where people that are on model behavior obviously don't want this. I think the model spec for OpenAI says something like, we don't want the model to be sycophantic and stuff. Like, that's been in there since 2024. That's not new. But at the same time, who makes the final decision and how granular could these behavior things be? I don't know. Like, are they presented with multiple checkpoints and they choose based on something? It's really unclear how that actually works. And I think that understanding that difference and how it emerges relative to something like traditional software will be very important. I describe it as like the art of crafting a model, and it's we're seeing like this sycophancy isn't the only thing. O3 has weird things. The new Claude model has new things. Grok was supposed to be not woke and base, but sometimes it's still woke. Like there's a lot of things like this. It's just ChatGPT is a bigger scale.
There's a question of like, can the companies actually control what their models are doing? Once we get into a world when they are, when they're more powerful and more personalized and more tailored, as opposed to basically now with, even though there's a little bit of memory, everyone's getting the 99.5% the same experience.
This leads into the next conversation as well, which I put as point too.
But I do want to stay on the kind of the business case thing, because this is a theme that I think we've been talking about in ChinaTalk over a number of years, where like, engineers have power until they don't. And the more money and the more kind of like capitalist imperatives that come down onto the technology that the engineers create, the less the original creators end up having the capability to kind of change and shape it. And it just seems to me that it is like absolutely inevitable that all of the kind of like dark psychological arts, or just like, the ways you kind of grow retention time on any other entertainment platform are going to seep into AI powered products. And that's just like a scary and weird new thing for humanity. And like, you can sort of see how good it is when you talk about O3, and then you just like try to imagine how good it is multiplied by it being the best friend you've ever had. And that's just like a powerful concoction that no one's ready for. We're not going to, regulate our way out of. And we just like, I don't know, just like the wave is going to hit. It's going to be wild.
Well, we might regulate our way out, but it's years away. It takes crises to bring regulation, crises and lawsuits. I think I describe it as AI being more culturally salient than feeds because it happens in a modality like a text window that people are used to using for friendships, and that will evolve from there. And then your point on how it's the difference between taking existing user-generated content and just serving things to people is actually probably a nicer generalization than just ChatGPT, which also encompasses the fact that Meta Reels is going to start letting people do AI-generated video ads, and YouTube Shorts has AI-generated video tools already. And it's really just what happens when your content is the AI rather than shaping what's there.
Yeah.
And that obviously just gives much finer grained delivery. You just definitionally can search over an infinite space into more narrow creation. So I think that's a good way to put it for the general AI case. And there's already been examples on the chat window case with things like character AI. In many ways, it's, for me, a reflection is that like the AI safety thing, the card was played too early. And if the AI safety people had been chill about everything through 2023 and 2024, especially the first half, and GPT-4 and all this stuff, and if it was just now and like the sycophancy thing came, if like, whoa, let's put on the brakes, AI is different, I think people would be a lot more receptive. But the messaging was like, whoa, AI is different in 2023, and then nothing bad happened for 18 months, and then like eventually people just move on. So they spent their political capital too early, and as I think about, like, I reflect on what would be the stories of AI in a few years if I were to look back on what happens, and that is a very major one. I think there's one that's just the basic economics of you need this big tech investment to drive the chip supply chain and fix costs and actually just push AI to exist, and that's like the bubbly side of things. It's very important. But a lot of the cultural side on risk and safety and pace of progress, if you just think about taking away this AI safety card and when you play it, a lot could be so different.
I just think, like, I didn't see it, and now I see it so clearly. Like, this is going to be the most powerful, like, it is going to create, like, the most powerful media that, like, humanity has ever been faced with before.
We've been saying this for years. This isn't new.
But it's like, right, I don't know, it's right here, Nathan. It's just, I have a 9-month-old, right? And like whenever she sees a screen, she's just like gravitated towards it, right? And there are moments even with me where it's just like, okay, I can like fall into this hole of like scrolling, NBA TikTok videos or whatever. And it's like, you're sort of like semi-conscious or whatever. But like imagining that, but made for me, wearing my Meta glasses, talking to me all the time, which is just like, has like the perfect like tenor of voice for my mood at the moment. I don't know. It's
the metaverse. It's kind of is.
It's here, and we're not ready for it, and no one's ready for it. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, just from like a political angle, right? Like the ability for these things to persuade you, this way or another. I mean, it's to say nothing of like consumption habits or like talking you into gambling, or I don't know. It's I'm freaking out, Nathan. I'm freaking out.
Actually, in my use now, when I ask it a basic question, do I have to ask multiple AIs this because they're like more likely to just say yes? Or do I have to phrase the question in a way that they can't just say yes to? It's like you have to eliminate the yes man possibility when using AI. It's like, was my dog up at 2 a.m. because her teeth hurt because she's a 16-week-old puppy that's teething, or did she just want to play and we succumb to her? It's like, if I just phrase it the first way, HChatGPT is to be like, yeah, that makes sense. It's like, okay, like, I guess I feel better, but like, is it true?
It's kind of like the story, which may or may not be true, of like the North Koreans seeing porn for the first time when they get deployed to fight in Ukraine, and they're just like not ready to handle it. I mean, that story you just said, Nathan, feels like you're pretty immunized, but I mean, it's a big world out there, and
it's not
I don't
about
know.
the people who make the AI models.
Yeah.
It's about the billions of people that literally don't know what the heck it is, and they're just click on this and they're like, whoa, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know my phone. I didn't know Apple made that. Like, that's what the people with the iPhone are gonna say. Like, wow, thanks, Apple.
So how far away are we from this future? What's your latest on the pace of AI progress, Nathan?
Well, I think it's a knob that you can already do. I think a lot of it is what is the pace by which people are trying ChatGPT. I think a lot of people already have ChatGPT as their best friend, but then it's kind of the slow brain rot of the society. So what's the half-life of people's sanity? When presented with this, and that'll describe when it becomes a problem.
I was trying to ask you about your other article, but yeah, I guess that too.
Okay, I mean, the other thing is that it's just going to be the capability side. One of my biggest things in this article is that we're solving a lot more things, but I think for the average user of ChatGPT, like it's done, like it's good enough. They don't need anything else. So it's how much do they turn the sycophancy knob. But for the kind of optimistic side of, we hope AI can build new things like deep research plus, like something like deep research that's 100 times faster and 10 times better. Like, what does that look like? And these things are going to be checked off incrementally, but I would argue not exponentially. And then there's going to be new things like deep research that we didn't know they were going to work. And especially for enterprises and people building applications, whether it's some sort of transformation across modalities and so on, I think we're just going to keep checking boxes. It's like, it's not really like a bubbly thing anymore, but just kind of okay, they're grinding out these capabilities. They're learning things that people are trying with these models. And then as they learn what people want to do, you can create data to train the models to get better at. I think for going up in capability levels, so things that are increasingly hard rather than things that are just not covered. So that's an important distinction. Like, solving new math proofs and open-ended math questions that have been standing for 50 years is an extremely hard thing, while simple things like making 0 mistakes on transforming a table from integer notation to fraction notation and getting it approximately right. Like, you could, like, I am going to guess if you gave a 8x8 table with a bunch of decimals and tried to do that, it'd probably fudge one of them. And it's like stuff like that is like, okay, we're going to be able to get that to work. That's not that hard. And there are probably examples where it could do it a tenth of the time and then go to 100. But mostly I just kind of see AI capabilities expanding outwards. And there's still so much overhanging capability that it's going to drive so much value. But I'm mostly generally playing down this AI software singularity thing that just kind of seems more religious than practical.
All right, those were all assertions. Let's do a little bit of evidence, Nathan.
I think that, like, both sides are looking for evidence or something that is a prediction. So it's like, it's kind of a counterfactual that's hard to run. I would say that the evidence that's on the side for not is actually that, like, it hasn't happened already, and compute scaling is getting increasingly expensive.
Okay.
I think that, like, if you look at what the reasoning models were, the real major unlock was that the models now use inference time compute. So that's a step function that has happened. I think it's not at the top of the sigmoid, but that's just kind of a shift that could jump a whole bunch of capabilities, because we went from using a few tokens to tens of thousands of tokens on every question. We were spending 1,000 times the compute at inference. Like, okay, that's good that works, and we'll continue to be able to fine tune that. But we don't know when the next step change like that actually comes. I think what the RL is now battling is the same thing a similar thing to pre-training a few years ago, where it's like, okay, you have GPT-3, and I don't know if O3 you have balloons, it's hilarious. I don't know if O3, it's like if you have GPT-3, like O3 is probably more like GPT-4, and it's like a 10x, and it's a huge step, but like GPT-5 doesn't exist yet in terms of the pre-training. So it's like all of these are, you take a lot of progress really fast, and then it's kind of a slow grind. I don't think that AI is particularly good at sifting through data. It's like there's a lot of just dirty things that AI researchers have to do that we haven't seen proof that AI models can. I think you can obviously spend more on compute and get more out of AI models, so it's not particularly clever. I think that mostly why these aren't evidence-based discussions is that you differ on assumptions. And I stated my assumptions, and the AI 2027 authors would state different assumptions. And those are really what you have to debate. It's like the assumption of how AI progress is being made, and if algorithmic improvements can translate directly into 2x or 4x or 100x speedups.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, like, even though you're not completely on their trajectory, like, this stuff is still crazy. And like all of the, you know, not Jennifer Aniston, like all of the sort of like Jennifer Lawrence-y things that I've been freaking out over the past 10 minutes are like 100% baked in, like kind of already exist and are just like waiting to be productized a little bit. And like that'll happen in 6 months. Right. So, you know, we are in for regardless of whether or not we get flying cars, you know, we are in for a very wild ride. Setting aside the economic, you know, impact, just from a like interpersonal day-to-day experience alone of having these things be in our lives much more than they have been.
I think there's that side, which we covered in your personal examples, but also just technology companies' abilities to execute are going to be very honed. It's obvious at the AI companies because they're trying to do this for AI, but I think all these software products where you could scale software much more easily, it's just way easier to make technology companies work. And that's good for the tech industry. I don't know if it's like there's an optimistic vision where that is good for the average person in the world because there's more things that can exist. At the same time, I do expect like Google ad placement to get better and Meta ad generation to get better and Microsoft software products should get better. It's like all these things should just get better with using these AI models to write new code. Like I listened to the Claude Code podcast on Latent Space, and it's like they use Claude Code a lot at Anthropic, which is just you like tell Claude to do something, it does it in the background, you review the PR. I've done it for some basic things. It doesn't always work, but it's just kind of this autonomous workflow where AI can just handle a lot of the crap you have to deal with as an engineer quite well. And that makes it so you can have fewer teams. And I think that it's funny that a lot of this, it's not funny, but I don't think that it's not that software engineers are going to be unemployed. It's just probably going to be more dispersed and there's going to be more companies. And that's hopefully it is a great boon and kind of this dissemination of power across the tech landscape, but it's probably more likely that the big companies get more benefit out of it due to the costs of deploying it and so on. That's not really an old discussion. I just think that's very different than saying that one company rules them all because they're the one with this model and their software goes 1,000 times better. It's just like, okay, like you need to see some like, and the whole argument is based on like this is going to happen in one click. Or it's like they're going to make the innovation and then they're gone, and it's just like that's not something you could prepare for or really argue about because it seems like the root argument is that there's going to be technological innovations that 2x to 10x the output. And it's like predicting the inference time scaling with large scale reinforcement learning. It's like, how are we supposed to do that as a counter argument? It's like, it's sad that it's not easier. And I think it's very worthwhile continuing this exercise and trying to push back or push for. It just obviously becomes very contrived.
All right. We're like 6 months out from DeepSeek. How's China doing on the model front?
They're good. I mean, DeepSeek R1 exists. People expect R2 to be soon. There's not really much grounding in that. They released another, like what people call as a non-reasoning model, which is just like a normal ChatGPT model, which was very strong. Qwen released their Qwen 3 models, which have great scores. One of the biggest things for adoption is that all of these Chinese models have much more permissive licenses than the kind of US counterparts of Llama and Gemma mostly. And I think that has kind of a very kind of subtle effect. It's like a very soft powery thing to get more people on the models. At the same time, there's that license consideration, but there's also a lot of stories that I hear of like, I'm a medium-sized business and I won't let somebody spin up a Chinese open weight model on my servers for information hazards or tool use code execution risk. Where I think like these models that they're releasing now don't really have PRC influence because they're trained months ago. The PRC is just waking up and following your coverage on I learned what a study session is. It's like I'm learning about basic China things. And it's like these are not translated into policies that impact the models yet. So it's like there's trepidation out of probably reasonable fear of what the future models will be like, where there's very subdued adoption of these Chinese models due to kind of unmeasurable risks. And culture matters. So like politics matters in technological adoption. I'm not by no means an expert. I'm just regularly surprised by how often I hear, oh yeah, the Chinese model is great, but we can't deploy it because our IT officer said so. And it's like, okay, like that matters at the end of the day. And I don't see it changing as long as this trade war is going on. So then it's like the actual where the progress in open models on paper is very good and the best it has ever been. Like R1 was the first really frontier model with the permissive license. So on paper, the open versus closed gap has shrunk a lot. But if you axe these Chinese models out of the opportunity set, it's actually kind of the status quo where Llama 4 kind of flopped and is solid, but flopped for release in comms. Google's Gemma models have been getting better, but they're actually quite small, so they're not really at this like frontier model size if you want to host on premises. Like our models at AI2 have the permissive license. They're like a generation behind Llama in performance, but we haven't scaled up to frontier model size at pre-training and stuff like this. So if that's the case, there's still a kind of big gap between the models that people can actually use between open and closed. But I would say it summarizes these open models have really been smashing through these like GPT-4 barriers where they're really, even if they're smaller, their performance is still well beyond GPT-4's level, which is GPT-4 was kind of a step up where just so many long tail of things just worked with the models. So that like the open models getting solidly past that is going to be a good reliability point for just kind of basic things and people trying them. But this is going to be many years unfolding on the open thing. I think if you ask people on open source software when it was getting defined, it took like over 5 years to actually reach some sort of agreement. So it's like we need to keep showing how to actually use open models, but by no means is it actually going to be like, is it clear in any way?
Yeah. So to be clear, the state of models now is we have these closed things out of OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, which are a cut above. And then you have these class of Chinese models, which are, kind of more impressive from a licensing and also a capabilities perspective than what Meta and Google are bringing to the table. But like people are kind of, got the skeevies when it comes to actually really building businesses on them as opposed to just tinkering with them, which leads us to our question. Meta, $1 trillion company. I mean, like, why can't they do this? What's in the water, Nathan?
Politics. There's a lot of Game of Thrones shit happening there with people trying to consolidate power. And this separates the researchers who can make good output, and they have so many high quality researchers from being able to actually execute. And there's a lot of subtlety in avoiding that. And I think OpenAI has done a good job. It's their core modeling research is still like only 300 people. So the people who train the models at OpenAI is like 300 people. And then Meta it probably is like 1,000, a lot of middle management, and that's the problem. Like the problem is culture. They have the technical
Yeah.
ability, and it's just for whatever reason it's just a little broken there. And I hope that like I want them to turn around because the open ecosystem benefits from having multiple players that are in the right place. But it's like we don't need to tell complicated stories of like, oh, they went down this technical path, it didn't work out for them, or they got stuck in the tariff gate, so they messed up their release. They messed up their release either way, and like the technical path they're going down is fine. It just seems that the motivations for it are just bad. I think the chatbot arena thing where it's like they're calling themselves open models and they're highlighting a certain result on a model, and then that model with the result was not one that they actually released in their open models. It's like you can't get that by a strategy consultant, and they're not going to be like, bro, that doesn't make any sense. Like you got to release you got to talk about the models that you actually released. And it's like if that that is a probably Zuckerberg level decision or a Zuckerberg -1 of being like, yeah, it's fine. Like we did it. Like we did it. We accomplished it. Like honestly, that person deserves to go. Whoever checked off on that being okay. For a company of Meta's size, like they can release products. Like Meta ships a lot of stuff. They obviously could get the culture right in some areas. Some people attribute it to being too much money, where it's like, especially these middle managers in Gen AI are going to be making millions of dollars, and then performance bonuses for things making it into Llama and so on. Like that's a lot of money, but I think it's more complicated to that because these people were making a lot of money before that anyways.
Yeah, it's like you just don't have resource constraints, and it's kind of too many cooks in the kitchen. I don't know. It's a someone should write the business. Like I've yet to like read the great like magazine feature on this, but there should be because it's a fascinating little corporate case study of a company that like had every has and still does like has every business reason and every corporate capability necessary to like execute on this thing, which like a lot of other smaller teams all around the world have been able to do, and they're just not there.
Yeah, it gets more complicated. Like the Llama models are natively multimodal, which is a big change. And as you get more things you're trying to plug into the model, it really does get complicated. The dynamic is effectively you have big egos that did some work, but their work might be slightly subpar, and they're going to really advocate for their work to be included because they have an ego and pride about their work, and you have to get them to not do that. And I've heard that this somebody not in Meta has jokingly said like, oh yeah, you should just pay him off. Like you just pay him more to shut up and get a better model out of it. It's something that I've heard from a more effective organization. So it's probably something that people have actually done. And it's like, that's just so funny. So it's like, obviously, if that's another organization, Meta is not the only one like understanding how nuanced this is and like how much of a fine line it is. If the trade-off is like, if you literally have to pay people off to avoid a crisis, like, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, and like, look, Google's figured it out, which is kind of amazing.
People underestimate AI overviews, which is an extremely high use AI product. And all the Gemini stuff might just be a distraction. It's like the Gemini stuff is a distraction, or like AI Studio specifically is a distraction for AI researchers and the people who built the model to show it off and get their peers excited about it and help with recruiting. Where all Google needs to do is make AI overviews extremely profitable and make Google Cloud extremely profitable. And all this Gemini app stuff, I don't think Google was going to be in the business of making a ChatGPT competitor anyways. That seems much more up Meta's alley, which Meta does have the AI app now, which will be it's one to watch relative to ChatGPT. If it's a sycophancy war, I'm probably going to bet on Meta.
Well, but I don't know. They got the Meta blood in them now with Mrs. Fidji as the new CEO of applications. So I don't know. Maybe she'll go even further than Zuck let her in the heady 2010 days.
I don't know. I listened to the book Careless People, the memoir by the Meta Global Affairs policy person. Good read, but TLDR is that Zuckerberg let them pushed. He didn't have the reins on when it came to growth and other things. I think you would really like it, and a lot of your listeners, and understanding the dynamics of a major tech company pushing for growth and influence primarily internationally and with political power struggles.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll put it on the list. Anything else on the AI stuff before we do our career things?
Relative to what some of these, what I would call like X-risk warriors and takeoff scenarios are, I still think there's many years of very solid progress on raw capabilities and also just in terms of making money off of AI coming. So it's like there will be a bubbly correction when it comes to VC startups. I think a lot of them raised on the kind of 2 to 3 years of runway, and some of those are going to start running out, and they could look like big scalps, but most of it is GPU collateral. So it's like kind of this weird. They raise a huge round, but most of it is on collateral on these GPUs, which don't go away if the company goes away. So a lot of weird things there. People will probably overact some companies going away, but it was bound to happen. Overall, the AI industry seems super healthy, which is kind of remarkable when you look back 2 years. It's like, when people are raising these rounds, it's like Mistral raised that round, like a seed round where they give away 45% of their company and they're still living. Yeah, it's like it seems fine.
Nathan, you wrote a little nice career reflection post. What do you want to say to the kids out there?
It takes a long time. People don't want to sit here recording podcasts for 5 years before we finally make any money, right, Jordan?
We're like 7, but yeah.
Yeah. There are 2 stories. One is that it takes a long time. Even if you're somewhere like Berkeley, some of the anecdotes I had were like, I was astute enough to pick up that AI was obviously the thing that was happening in 2017. But even if you're at a place like Berkeley or Stanford, you can't just go like get into one of these research groups. You can't just pivot. You kind of have to do this long, slow slog and wait for somebody that's like good and sincere and asking to collaborate. I think in that post, there was other things that I had tried to do, which were just like collaborate with postdocs that didn't give a shit, like didn't work. But it's kind of, it's the in between the line details that don't matter. But it just takes a long time. It took me a year to get a real collaborator while being a motivated grad student at Berkeley. If you're not at a program, it's going to take you longer. Like you're going to find maybe a collaborator within a year, but it's not going to be a postdoc in a leading AI lab. It's going to be a random other person that wants to do AI research. So it just takes a long time and a lot of cycles on goal. And I mean, people ask me about this with athletics too. And it's like, can I do X, Y, Z? It's like some random person that's like a mid-age, losing track of their health tech person. It's like, can I qualify for the Boston Marathon? I'm like, yeah, you absolutely can. You just don't want to do the 48-week training cycle that I'm going to sign you up for. Like, it's not crazy. You'll be doing 7 to 10 hours a week of training for 48 weeks, and I can tell you exactly what you need to do, and you'll get injured a couple times, but like people just don't want to do that shit. Like that's the most of the problem. In AI, I think there might be a little bit easier than training for the Boston Marathon because it doesn't hurt quite as much. Like starting running sucks, but it just takes a long time. And then the other side is kind of reflecting on like, what does execution actually mean? And what does the difference between a career at Hugging Face before ChatGPT doing random things versus a career at Hugging Face after ChatGPT when you're doing something that's actually aligned with the community? It's very hard to know at the time that you're doing the right thing, because I was at Hugging Face and I was committing code, and in teams and projects would come and go, and it all looks very normal. And it takes a lot of trying things before you know you actually have traction on something. And I think that's something that comes with experience. I think now I could see it a bit better just because I have a baseline for when things actually land. And it's just that's the thing that takes a lot of attempts to kind of get a sense for what actually matters. And a lot of companies will make it hard to do that. So a lot of careers in big companies is going to be playing the game to get promoted that all of your peers are also playing. And a lot of big companies are kind of like that. And a lot of the goal is finding a team or within a company where that's obviously not the goal. And either like that's something that leadership cares directly about deliverables, so you can kind of skip a bunch of levels and get noticed, or a lot of the work is in public, so it's not about always just promoting within the company, but you can also get mind share outside of the company, which is like both of them are valuable. Like internal company stuff is how you get promoted, but external mind share is how you always have a job waiting for you. And that's a kind of power where it's like I don't like I can do what I want. I'll just go get a different job if I want a different job. And once you have that option, like things are, you could take a lot more risk, or you could just write blog posts for 6 months and be like, oh, I'm just going to ship it at work.
And this is why everyone listening to this needs to start their own Substack and their own newsletter, is particularly on the sort of like China and tech analysis side. Like if you're at a consulting firm and you do good work, like 5 people will know about it. And if you write something online and you do good work, like your entire career cohort and all of the hundreds of other future people who could hire you will know about it. So, it is important to do a good job in your work, especially when you're junior, or actually at any time. But like forgetting the fact that the amount of people in your field and the amount of opportunities that are out there that are beyond the direct thing that you could be promoted for in your company is like, I don't know, orders of magnitude larger, should, I think, make folks really internalize, particularly now that we live in like the age of the internet, and you can write things even anonymously and people can like read them, that to have some sort of public profile presence, like portfolio, that you can kind of gain credibility points from, is just something that everyone should be taught by their career counselor when they're 21 years old looking for a job.
So jobs where you are very open about what you're doing and can do other open things are far more consistent career growth. So even if your output is mid, you're going to have growth proportional to that mid output, which if you have mid output at a closed lab, you probably have no growth. You don't get promoted. You don't have anything. And it's just kind of a safe bet. It's not the only way to do things, but I definitely agree. I think that I talk about in this post a kind of backcasted strategy, which is, wow, AI is getting really closed. What if I just keep doing what I'm going to do and don't go off to some random flashy job? And it's like, oh, look, a few years later, nobody can talk about anything. So like I'm looked at as a person that knows how to train AI models, is transparent about it, is people associate me with like all of AI2's output. And I'm like, oh God, I'm not on all of this stuff. Like AI2 is doing well, but like, come on, like don't do that to me. And that's just by like, it takes a lot. A lot of it is just work. I think I'm at the point where I tweet less, but when you're on like all of these platforms are, the amount of iterations you put in are proportional to your growth. And most of them are, growth is easier once you have a bigger following. So it's just a lot of times striking the match when you have like no following to just slowly build up +1, +2, +3. It's like the first 1,000 Twitter followers are hard, but once you have 1,000, it's like pretty easy to get more Twitter followers if you really want that. That's the kind of phase that I think getting through in an early mid-career is pretty good. So like getting to the point where you have some small level of distribution will help open a lot of doors.
Yeah, and I think this is what like the youth don't kind of understand, because all they see are LinkedIn job posting and like recruiters coming to, your college career fairs or whatever, is like once you get to a certain point, like the jobs get created for you and like there is inbound. And that is where you want to be living. But like getting to that place requires people to know you exist and know you do good work. And that only happens if you work in public, not work
I can
privately.
give an anecdote. And part of the thing that me being public brings a lot of value to AI2 for is recruiting. So the last 3 people we've hired on my team at AI2 have either been people that I've been working on recruiting for years or wanted to recruit for a while, or like cold inbound to me. And it's like, we still filter it. We read all these applicants, but it's just like a lot of lukewarm stuff. But these are people that either wrote a killer email and have done that one. In that case, it's like open source contributions I could easily look at, and a good blog. And it's like, oh, wow, like this guy works in computer vision, but he wrote a kick-ass blog post on this like RLHF method. I was like, okay, like that's cool. or other people that I just had known through they had written a blog or being in this kind of open community and talking for years. I was like, those are three of the last people I've hired onto my team, and I've read hundreds of resumes. I think there's other academic hires, which are like we hire a random postdoc, and like that's an academic thing. But these are like engineering roles, and it's like that's the fact on the table. It's not always going to be like that, but in terms of how it works for individuals and value to AI too, like that's really high at the end of the day.
So we got this great Confucius line, right? At 15, I had my mind bent on learning. At 30, I stood firm. At 40, I had no doubts. At 50, I knew the degrees of heaven. At 60, my ear was an obedient organ for the reception of truth. And at 70, I could follow what my heart desired without transgressing what was right. So I think it took me until I was 35, but I do feel like I am standing firm now. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that, you know, I have this like career ground, which has been built by doing things out in public. So anyways, I shouted this out on the episode with Tony Stark a few weeks ago, but like write your Substack, write 5 articles, reach out to me. I'll give you feedback. We'll do cross posts, whatever. But like the world needs more thinking about technology in China and all that good stuff. And like you can give it to, you can bring it to them. Like I know you can.
The thing about writing that people miss is that there are no new original ideas really, and it's all just repackaging it in your worldview. And I think the kind of algorithmification of everything actually rewards people with voice and individuals, where if you go back 50 years ago, like just writing the information down 50 years ago is of such value. And there's still areas of the world where that is the case, and like AI is one of them. But in terms of building a career, like so much of it is your voice and the perspective you put on things and the engagement that adds. I personally think that a lot of my ideas on how I analyze AI model releases is downstream of reading something like Cautionary for multiple years, which is his beat is like company earnings and how platforms are evolving, and my beat is like AI performance and how AI models are evolving. And I at that point I kind of just do it and I write my state of the world, and it looks like it's about a specific model, and yeah, there's plots about evals, but really it's about this trend of how models are evolving and kind of how I see things. And there are so many different ways for people to do that. And it's mostly takes practice.
All right. We should probably call it there. Nathan, this was fun. Thanks for dropping by.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.